I've always disagreed with the sentiment of you either love or you hate Death Stranding. Like, I think there's room for a bit of nuance here. Sure, it's definitely not a game for everyone, but with the first game I fell into the camp of, I really like the idea, I love the story and the themes, and I didn't find the gameplay overly annoying. But I wouldn't go as far as to say that I loved the game. Well, that's changed. I love Death Stranding 2. It takes almost every issue with the first game and improves it. And whilst I think it's actually weaker in a couple key areas, Death Stranding 2 is, generally speaking, a better game than its predecessor. But why does Death Stranding 2 work? The gameplay loop is Amazon Delivery Man. The shooting is pretty clunky. The story is poorly paced. Death Stranding 2 shouldn't work at all. Yet somehow, it does, and in this video, we're going to discuss why. But before we get into that, if you do end up enjoying the video, then please consider subscribing as we are trying to reach 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year, but enough of that nonsense, let's get started. So here's the thing, Death Stranding 2 is still, at its core, about delivering packages. You're still walking, climbing, driving, and doing random crap that Kojima thinks of at 3 AM. That hasn't changed, but what has changed is when the game starts feeling good. In Death Stranding 1, those first 10 or so hours were intentionally a test of patience. You were tripping over rocks, you were sliding down hills, you were placing ladders and treating a river as if it were a ravine. But eventually, after you built up your network and unlocked better gear, something started to click. You were zipping between facilities, you were driving through the timefall, and you were slapping down roads like a, post-apocalyptic urban planner. It was fantastic, but it took a while to get there. You had to earn it. Death Stranding 2 says, what if we just gave you the good stuff earlier? And it works. From the early hours, you've got better access to vehicles, you've got more chiral bandwidth to build things, and a much more cooperative online environment. The game doesn't make you suffer through hours of walking just to earn a pair of skeleton legs. You still start small, but the ramp up to that magical delivery flow state is so much faster. And some people may not actually like this. The hardcore Death Stranding 1 worshippers relished that challenge. Don't get me wrong, it is still there, but it's nowhere near as tumultuous as the first game made it. You get access to the roads, to the bridges, to the timefall shelters, to the zip lines so much earlier, and not just to build them, but to find them already built. One of the best feelings in the game is coming upon a gap, something that you need to cross, and seeing that somebody has already placed the perfectly aligned piece of structure that you need. Let's say you're driving your truck is running out of battery, you're thinking, oh no, I didn't bring a PCC to build one because I'm an idiot, and then suddenly you find somebody else built one there for you. Those moments are constant now. They're not rare, they're not a surprise, they're just part of how the world works. It feels like a lived-in world, remarkably, one where everyone's already contributed to the infrastructure, and you feel the benefit almost immediately. There's also a huge increase in how often these creations appear. It's like the chiral network is supercharged this time. The frequency of these online structures means that you're always in some way piggybacking off someone else's helpful creation, and just as often, you'll be returning the favour. Or at least you should be. It makes traversal feel communal, which is still one of the best things that this series does. There's no direct interaction, but you feel supported. It's quite moving, really. You give someone's bridge a like as you pass over it, and you hope to return the favour later down the road. There's also nothing like driving or walking through this world, putting a song on in the in-game music player, and just taking it all in. Say what you will about this series and whether you enjoy the gameplay or not. There is no other game out there that can give you an experience like this. And then there's the truck. Oh yes, the truck. As you've probably seen from the clips already, this thing was my best friend in Death Stranding 2. You can take it practically anywhere, and with a bit of clever ramp or bridge placement, you can take it literally anywhere. You can go up the mountains in the snowy area in this truck. It will make it if you're smart about it. You can bypass huge chunks of the game if you're careful with how you use the truck. You're not untouchable, of course. The mountains do make it a bit more difficult, but if you really map out your route and you're very careful with where you take the truck, you can beat the whole game with the thing. And the best part is that all of these improvements, in my opinion, don't undermine the original game's sense of struggle, they build upon it. You remember what it used to be like. So when you effortlessly glide between facilities on a well-placed network of structures, it doesn't feel cheap, as if Kojima has just grabbed a hammer and smashed all the difficulty out. It feels like progress, like the world itself has grown, because it has. And this is the weird part. None of this, the improved traversal, the streamlined tools, none of it would hit anywhere near as hard if you hadn't played the first game. Death Stranding 2 is absolutely built on the back of your suffering from Death Stranding 1. The first game was, frankly, annoying. You crawled through every inch of a shattered America, dragging cargo over icy cliffs, falling down hills, getting your stuff drenched away in the rivers, getting attacked by oil ghosts. It was slow, it was punishing, and sometimes it definitely bordered on tedious. But it meant something. The payoff was that eventually, after dozens of hours, you started building connections, literal and metaphorical. That long road of struggle is what makes Death Stranding 2 feel so good, because now you have earned this. Sam has already done the work. You have already done the work. You connected the chiral network throughout America. Why should you not get to enjoy an easier Australia as a result? So when the sequel opens up and you're immediately much more capable, it doesn't feel like the game is being easier. It feels like the world remembers what you did. It's like the planet itself has changed because of you. Of course there's more infrastructure. Of course you're more equipped. Of course Sam doesn't need to relearn how to do all the things you did in the first game. And thematically that's perfect. This is a series about building, about effort, about laying foundations so that others don't have to struggle the way that you did. The whole message of Death Stranding is that the hard work of connecting people matters, not just in the moment, but for everyone who comes after. And you are that person who came before. You're not just playing a sequel, you are stepping into a world where your struggle has already happened, where the tears have dried and the roads have been paved. The streamlining in Death Stranding 2 is not a shortcut, it is a reward. It mirrors what Sam himself has gone through. He is not some confused loner stumbling through the apocalypse who's scared of being touched anymore. He is a seasoned porter. He can hug people. The world sees him differently and so does the game. You're both now much more experienced, and that shared sense of growth makes every smoother delivery, every moment of convenience, feel like a small victory that you have earned through your past struggles. And that's what makes Death Stranding 2 so interesting to me. On paper it might seem like they've removed the difficulty, they've removed the bite, but in the context, that's the point. The world should feel less hostile, you should be more prepared, and you need to have lived through that first game to feel the full weight of that change. I will persist that you need to play Death Stranding 1 before you play Death Stranding 2. I do not just mean for story reasons. You could watch a story recap and you would understand the story of the game, but you will not appreciate what Death Stranding 2 does if you did not play Death Stranding 1 yourself. And that is why jumping into this game without playing the first one misses the magic. You may understand the plot with a recap, but you won't feel it the same way. But for those who dragged themselves through the rain and the snow and the mud to build the chiral network the first time, this version of the world is beautiful because it remembers what you went through to get here. One area that the game could have improved upon, I feel, though, is the combat. Now look, no one's going in a Death Stranding 2 expecting, I don't know, Doom level of combat finesse, but even with expectations firmly in check, the combat still feels a bit clunky. The controls are serviceable, but they lack the responsiveness and precision you would expect from a modern action game, especially a sequel that leans into much more frequent combat encounters. And I know what you're going to say, you're going to make a defensive point, and you know what, it's a point that makes sense. You're going to say, well, it's not like we're playing as Leon Kennedy, it should feel clunky. And yeah, I understand that, but I just feel like when you're doing combat more as you are in Death Stranding 2 than you were in the first game, I just wish it felt a bit better. The new weapons are fun to experiment with, but there's still this lingering feeling of combat feeling slightly at odds with the rest of the experience. It works, it's functional, but I would never say it's ever particularly satisfying. Boss fights too are a bit of a mixed bag. I think the ones that are here are actually really strong. They're visually stunning, the designs are weird and inventive in classic Kojima fashion, and the final boss in particular I found genuinely excellent. But the problem is that there is a lot of recycling going on here. There is a lot of reused bosses. It doesn't ruin the experience, but it definitely dulls the impact when they function the exact same way each time. In a game that's otherwise bursting with creativity and strange, beautiful ideas, it's a little disappointing that some of the major confrontations feel like reruns. BT encounters in Death Stranding 2 are still somewhat eerie and atmospheric, but I feel like they've lost a lot of their edge. They're much easier to avoid, they're much less threatening, and in a lot of cases completely skippable, especially if you're in the truck, my best friend. What used to be tense, slow-paced stealth sections I can now drive clean through without having to give them a second thought. Stealth too often feels less essential. You can still crouch and hold your breath with them, but the game rarely demands that level of caution, and while it may fit the theme, you are more prepared now, it does come at the cost of tension. The BTs no longer dominate in the way that they're used to. I can still very vividly remember countless encounters with the BTs from the first Death Stranding, which I played on launch. That was a very, very long time ago. I remember struggling and suffering through, cutting these umbilical cords. I can remember them so clearly, and I beat Death Stranding 2 a week ago, and I can barely remember any BT encounter that I had with it. Now let's talk about the story, because of course Death Stranding 2 still has a lot of it. This is still very much a Kojima game, which means you're getting long cutscenes, wildly abstract concept, and characters who speaks in metaphors and acronyms more than actual conversation. And look, that's part of the charm. But even with expectations set to philosophical fever dream, the story this time doesn't hit quite as hard as it did in the first game, at least not for me. The biggest issue is of course the pacing. Once again, all the major story developments are packed into the final 5 hours of the game. You will go, I think it's like a 15 to 20 hour period where you're just doing things. There's barely anything happening story-wise. Things do happen, the story does progress, but it's not by a lot. It's not, I don't even remember what the word is, it's not an even ratio to how much the game develops compared to how quickly the story develops. A lot of plot threads stall, and I could not shake the feeling that the game was intentionally saving everything for the big finale, and it was. When that finale does arrive, it's emotional, it's bold, it's full of that classic Kojima gravitas, but it also comes suddenly, like the game suddenly remembered it needed a plot resolution. I know that that is obviously not the case, but that is how it felt. A lot of the new characters I feel are more symbolic than fleshed out. They're interesting in concept, and I would love to see more of them in a potential future game with these people that are dealing with their grief and their purpose and their identity, but they don't always land as people. They feel a lot like thematic devices more than individuals with depth. You meet them, you hear their backstories, and then they're kind of just there until the plot requires them to do something. There are exceptions, of course, and a few late game scenes do a lot of heavy lifting to give these characters weight, and I do like them all, but the emotional investment isn't as strong or consistent as it was in the first game with the likes of Fragile, Mama, or even Higgs. That said, the broader themes of the story are still strong. It's a game about rebuilding after loss, about dealing with the unknown, about the fragility of connection and how tomorrow will look and its influence on today. There's also this undercurrent of legacy running through everything as well. The world has changed, the stakes are different, but the scars of the first game are still visible, whether it's Sam dealing with his past or newer characters trying to understand theirs. There is a consistent sense that no one's really starting fresh, they're all carrying something forward. So while the narrative doesn't quite match the emotional highs of the first game to me, and definitely drags for long stretches, that's not just to me, that's objective, it's not bad, it's just uneven. You will get moments of brilliance sandwiched between hours of quiet deliveries and vague exposition. It's a game that still means something, but maybe doesn't always know the best way to say it clearly. Look, I'm far from a Kojima glazer. The truth is, I've only ever actually played 3 Kojima games. Death Stranding 1, Death Stranding 2, and Metal Gear Solid 5. And I didn't even finish that one. Sue me. But it is undeniable that Death Stranding 2 is simply an unforgettable experience and a special game. There's just nothing else like it. Death Stranding 1 was a game I was glad I played, but not one I always enjoyed. It was slow, it was strange, and it was often intentionally frustrating. But it stuck with me, it lingered. The more time passed, the more I appreciated what it tried to do, even when it didn't fully work. Death Stranding 2 is different. This one I did love. It still has its flaws, sure, the pacing is messy, the combat is clunky, and not every idea lands. But it's a game made with vision, with conviction. It dares to be weird, it dares to be quiet, it dares to mean something. And that is so rare in the modern AAA space. Most big games are afraid to let you slow down, to lower their engagement metrics. This one makes a whole franchise out of slowing down, of thinking and of connecting, of taking in the moment. And even when it stumbles while trying something honest, something personal, and it achieves so in style. And that is what's worth celebrating. So no, Death Stranding 2 shouldn't work. On paper it's ridiculous, but somehow, against all odds, it does. And I can't stop thinking about it, and I doubt I ever will. Keep on keeping on. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. I hope that you did enjoy it. If you did, then please make sure to leave a like, as it really does help me out. And if you want to see more videos from me, then you could always consider subscribing, because I upload at least one video a week. Remember, we're trying to get to 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. That would just make me the happiest fellow around. But for now, that is all. Have a nice day, and goodbye.